I have to apologize. Sincerely, truly, really, and honestly. We won't be landing in Alabasta this part, and I really truly intended to. I planned for this series to be 11 parts, but now it's going to be 12. I was putting together my script for the first part of Alabasta and reviewing the completed part 6, and I had two realizations. The first was that, even though I'm mostly happy with what I've put out so far, I still feel like I've missed some stuff. I've tried to make each part of this series focus on a specific topic, but that restriction, although I think it makes the scripts feel a bit more cohesive than the point of East Blue, I have noticed, especially while editing, that there are just some small tidbits of Oda detail that are slotted in that I simply didn't get to cover, because they are unrelated to the part's theme, or I just missed them. The second was that in the first Alabasta part, I was hoping to sort of summarize everything we've learned before getting to Alabasta so I could show how Oda's been building us up to reach Alabasta, making sure we're fully prepared for when the Straw Hats and crew touch down in the Land of Sand, being a bit more explicit about the world building and thematic elements that Oda has been developing for us. However, just my bullet points for the first Alabasta part are over 4 pages long, while my longest completed script is 10 pages long, so once those bullet points are expanded into proper scripted sentences, well, there just wouldn't be enough time to make a video that long. So an extra part it is, but a different kind of part compared to the others. I'm going to be going over things that I think I've missed leading up to the end of Drum Island, and then summarize all the information we've learned thus far to put Alabasta into perspective. And for good measure, I'll also cover Django's cover story because that's another thing I have to slot in somewhere, so it might as well be now. If you've managed to stick with me through this long intro, thank you so much, and without any further delay, it's time for me to reveal some missed things and then sum up the journey so far during the Grandeur of Alabasta. Let's start off with some overdue Karoo appreciation. Ultra Spot Bill Karoo is just a great little guy. Well, alright, he's not actually little, but he gives those silly little guy vibes. Really, I'd say he's a bit of an Usopp-like character. He's a scaredy cat, but bless him, he'll do anything to protect Vivi. He ventures out into the scary jungle against what is clearly his wishes, just so he can protect her. And then there's his standout moment when he's confronted by Mr. Five and Miss Valentine, and yet he's ready to die in order to protect Vivi, not even letting out a solitary quack when abused by the pair. I mentioned those two things, but I didn't mention that it looks like Karoo is the one that, when beaten and bloodied, digs up Luffy so that they can go rescue Vivi and the crew, and then charges back into battle with them. I gave credit for the maneuver de-waxing the crew to Usopp, but while it is his plan, it's Karoo that carries it out, avoiding the blast sent his way by Mr. Five and guiding the rope to where it needs to go. He then accompanies Luffy in chasing down Mr. Three and Miss Golden Week, and is the one that, takes Miss Golden Week down? I'm not sure. We get this panel of Karoo finding her and Miss Golden Week freaking out, but then it's kind of just over. Either way, good job, Karoo. Then there are his actions during Drum Island where he nearly dies trying to save Zoro because he thinks Zoro is going to freeze to death going for a swim. The focus of Alabasta is Vivi and her relationship with the crew, but let's get something clear here. Karoo is probably even better integrated into the crew than Vivi is up to this point. He catches the crew's vibe long before Vivi does, and he's willing to put himself at risk to save a member of the Straw Hat crew. Karoo is just as much a member of the Straw Hats as Vivi is, and that's something worth keeping in mind when we make landfall in Alabasta when he really gets to shine. I really wanted to talk more about the skill-heart distinction of doctors when talking about Kureha and Hiruluk, mainly in the Kureha direction. Kureha is the epitome of skill, though as mentioned she does have the heart of a doctor too. But her skill is also displayed in the absolutism of treatment. She knows what the treatment is, and she will enforce the proper treatment of her patients, whether they're willing or not. As she says to Nami, people either leave her practice cured or dead. No half measures. Even when Nami gives her the key to Wapol's weapons cache, Kureha cannot allow herself to endorse Nami ending her treatment early, and can only passively allow her to escape. I think it's important to note that this full application of medicine is what Chopper is inheriting from Kureha, and really fleshing out what a skilled doctor means. So I just thought I'd make that clear. Sort of in relation to this is what Oda introduces as the limits of medical technology in the One Piece world. This is what made the Drum Kingdom worth inviting to the World Council, after all. In regards to treating injury, it appears as though medical technology is quite literally miraculous. The 20 doctors literally reassemble Wapol, including reattaching his head, though that may just be a quirk of his devil fruit. Then they heal a skewered and frozen Dalton, bringing him back from the brink of death as well. Physical injuries seem to be healable, even extreme ones, but it's in the treatment of diseases that the medical limits of One Piece don't match the treatment of physical ones. It makes sense. Chopper wouldn't have much of a dream if incurable diseases were already under control. Then there are the very mini things that I think are worth mentioning, such as Zoro's respect for Usopp. When Usopp is carrying Dalton and Zoro takes over, I don't think he's being sarcastic when he says he knows that Usopp was about to get serious. Zoro isn't under a misinterpretation of Usopp's abilities. I think he acknowledges that Usopp isn't that quote-unquote strong, but he definitely still recognizes the strength of Usopp's conviction, just as he did when they first met. Sanji is still self-sacrificial. I introduced this point in the East Blue. Sanji is very quick to be willing to use his life for the sake of others. He was willing to do it to delay the capture of the Baroque, he was quick to do it by jumping into the water to rescue Luffy during the fight against Arlong ahead of Zoro, and he does it again during Drum Island to save Nami. I didn't want to just let this detail slide because it's an ongoing pattern of behavior that Sanji exhibits, and this is one of his most obvious examples of it during the Alabasta saga. Now, it's also very important to note that Luffy leaves Nami behind for a bit to go back and rescue Sanji. Luffy cares about his crew equally, even if Sanji was ready to sacrifice himself for Nami. Luffy doesn't even consider accepting Sanji's sacrifice. He goes in and digs Sanji up to make sure that he also survives and then carries both of them to Dr. Kureha. There is a mismatch between how Luffy sees Sanji's worth as a member of the crew and how Sanji sees his own worth as a member of the crew, and that's something important to keep in mind. Finally, I may have undersold Dalton as a character, because there's this moment when he's preparing to confront Wapol where he says, "Justice is not what I'm after, you and I are guilty of the same sin," which is a profound line of someone who's dedicated himself to saving his kingdom. I was definitely painting Dalton as what a king should be, a balance of heart and power, but it's important to show that there is this self-doubt in Dalton, that he is just a man, someone that acknowledges what he is doing is seeking revenge on Wapol, that he's not the perfect leader. Dalton in the grand scheme of things isn't that important of an individual, but I think I've gained some newfound appreciation on the depth of his character while making this series. And he makes a good comparison point when we finally arrive in Alabasta and meet its king properly. Now, with those things I've missed out of the way, though as always every time I reread One Piece I feel like I discover something new, leave in the comments if you still think I've missed something, let's get to Django's cover story, Django's Dance Heaven, or Dance Paradise, one of the two. Back in the Point of East Blue, we established that these cover stories actually have implications, as shown explicitly through Buggy's cover story, which ends up pairing him with Alvida, who together reappear at Logetown. That's why they're worth covering. This cover story does have the minor complication that it ends partway through Alabasta though, something that I'll bring up when we get there during the exploration of Alabasta. That said, what can we glean from Django's adventure? First and importantly, he gets out of Usopp's hometown, chased out by the former Usopp pirates, now the Usopp security force, so good on them protecting the village in their former captain's stead. It was kind of up in the air what actually happened to Django. We saw Kuro getting thrown into the Black Cat pirate ship, but Django was kind of just left in the forest. Oh well, he's out now and he makes his way to Mirrorball Island, landing at Port Dance. We see his bounty of 9 million berries, so Django was no slouch. The average bounty in the East Blue was 3 million, so comparatively, he was actually considered quite a threat. He enters a dance contest, coming across another familiar face, Lieutenant Fullbody, and they bond over their shared love of dance. The crowd loves it too, and Django is crowned Lord of the Dance. Fullbody, for as much of a jerk as he appeared to be back in the Baroque, is more than happy for him too, and the two form a friendship. It doesn't appear as though it's going to last though, as Marines discover Django's discarded clothes, and Django learns that Fullbody is a Marine, so as the Tulip pirates land on the island and cause a ruckus, Django makes his escape. But when things are looking bad for Fullbody, who lets himself get beaten when a woman is taken hostage, Django returns, and the two friends take on and defeat the Tulip Pirates. They are dancing heroes, but Fullbody has a duty. It's sad, but Django accepts it. He's a pirate, Fullbody is a marine, and Fullbody will do what he must and arrests Django. Django goes to trial and is sentenced to death by hanging. But Fullbody intercedes, his impassioned dancing moves the courtroom and overturns the verdict. Django gets acquitted at the cost of something Fullbody once held dear, his marine rank. But friendship is more important. Too important. Django wants to remain friends, but Fullbody turns him down. He can't be friends with a pirate, it will get in the way of his duty. So in a final act of kindness, Django moves to hypnotize Fullbody to forget their friendship. Though, before the hypnotism is complete, a female marine officer walks past and a new pathway is opened, one where the two can remain friends. Django joins the Marines and joins Fullbody serving under this mysterious female officer. Alright, so what do we actually learn? The story is cute, but surely there's a point to it. Well, actually, yeah. We learn that pirates stand trial. It seems like it may be obvious, but we didn't actually know if pirates got trials or whether they just got executed, jailed, or whatever. It's a trial by 3 judges as well, and the trials appear to be open to the public. Although I don't think these are fair trials. 2 of the judges are very clearly drinking on the job. It may be the case that these trials are often show trials where pirates are always found guilty, except in the case of very convincing dancing. That's just speculation on my part though, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case. Next we catch a glimpse of Koby, Helmeppo, and Garp, and Koby and Helmeppo are looking a little different. They're starting to look built, and our cute little squishy-faced Koby is starting to look a little more mature. We're under the expectation that Koby will return since Buggy returned and Koby has already received his own cover story, so it's nice to see him developing in the background. But the most important thing in this story is the theme. The story of a marine and a pirate working together to take down a pirate threatening an island. Something very interesting to keep in mind and something we haven't seen before. Something that I'll surely be bringing up in due time. Speaking of which, what are the key points we need to remember before reaching Alabasta? First off, I think it's very important to remember something established at the start of this saga. Things are not as they appear. A whale can contain tunnels and an island, a friendly town can turn into an island of bounty hunters. Even extending past the first couple of parts where I mentioned this, it extends into the other arcs. Little Garden was an island inhabited by giants. Tall Tales became reality, and Mr. Three's plan was executed with subterfuge. On Drum Island, a pirate was actually a former king. A reindeer could turn into a human, the 139-year-old was the most full of life, and a quack cured a country. When we arrive at Alabasta, we shouldn't be taking anything at face value. Oda's been teaching us that as soon as we've entered the Grand Line, all in preparation for our arrival at the saga's final destination. That of course includes Baroque Works itself. Their members could be anywhere and they could be anything. Whiskey Peak taught us that. But the members may also be more than they appear. Vivi and Igaram were hiding amongst them after all, and even their partners turned against the organization to aid Vivi in her escape. We have had a break from Baroque Works during Drum Island, but let's not forget the seeds that Oda has planted that may become important during Alabasta. It's more than just their structure and secrecy, but also the individual members' attitude towards the company and one another. We need to keep in mind the general uncooperativeness of the members, the bounty hunter's willingness to catch Mr. 8 in the crossfire when trying to take on Zoro, and Mr. 3's desire to see Mr. 2 die so he could get a promotion. The number agents may treat their own partners with respect, but beyond that it seems like many in the organization are in it for their own gain, without any sort of loyalty or even kindness towards their fellow members. Those higher up on the chain look down at those beneath them, and those lower down the chain hope for those above them to fall so they can get promoted. It doesn't seem like a group that works together, but a group of individuals following the orders of their mysterious boss in order to achieve a utopia where they hope to reap the most benefits. And following orders is also key. Crocodile as Mr. Zero is ruthless, and failure, even perceived partial failure, means he's willing to cut off members at a moment's notice. They are merely tools for him to carry out his plan. To that end, Crocodile makes sure that members only need to know the bare minimum to complete their current objective. When he sent Mr. Five and Miss Valentine to take out Vivi, they were only told, "My secret is out," not what his secret was because it wasn't relevant to their mission. When Mr. 2 is sent to kill Mr. 3, he isn't told that Mr. 3 was originally sent to take out Vivi or to double check he'd completed his job, just get rid of Mr. 3. No more, no less. In amongst all this is the mysterious Miss All Sunday, Crocodile's right hand, someone seemingly acting towards her own goals, both aiding and abetting Vivi while she attempts to take on Baroque works, yet also mocking her and appearing to kill Igaram. Nobody seems to know what she's planning. Another key thing that Oda has been building since the very beginning is Vivi's relationship with Luffy and the rest of the crew. Vivi has been with the Straw Hats ever since they entered the Grand Line, and with each new island, her opinion of them and their opinion of her has slowly evolved. Of course, while under the persona of Miss Wednesday, Vivi didn't think much of them. They're dumb pirates who don't know a thing about sailing the Grand Line. Then at Whiskey Peak, she experiences the strength of Zoro and Luffy, and is more or less forced to rely on them in order to flee. She acknowledges that the pair are strong, but she definitely doesn't think they're strong enough to take on Crocodile. Even though she's with them due to necessity, she still thinks of them as strangers, exemplified when she's considering the eternal pose given to her by Miss All Sunday, and she refers to the crew as these people who are giving her a ride. Nami at this point is invested in getting Vivi home safely, as I believe she sees her past self in Vivi, but to Vivi this relationship is transactional. The crew are the people who will get her back to her kingdom, and thankfully a couple of them seem pretty strong. Little Garden is where the relationship starts to properly develop. I noticed that before the crew steps foot on the island, no one calls Vivi by name, either calling her Miss Wednesday or Princess by Sanji. By the end of the arc, the crew are calling her Vivi. Even Sanji, who really shouldn't have much of a reason to, but I think it's the case of narrative overriding logic, which is fine. Vivi goes through the Nami-esque journey of having her perception on pirates changed by seeing how Luffy and the crew act, and she importantly learns how much the crew trust Luffy. When the crew don't blame her for what happened, her trust and appreciation of them also grows, and of course there's the fact that they've gotten through this ordeal together. Finally, on Drum Island, the crew and especially Luffy begin to trust Vivi. On Little Garden, when Vivi is bemoaning the fact that the log pose will take a year to set and that her kingdom can't wait that long, Luffy's response is pretty tepid. It's like, "Oh yeah, that's annoying, but even worse, we'll get bored." Clearly he's not particularly invested in the whole Alabasta situation, he's just fulfilling the obligation that Nami has signed them up for. It is when Vivi puts a member of the crew before her own needs that the crew's attitude begins to change, and as a result they begin to trust her and consider her as more than just a passenger. Vivi puts her body on the line to make sure Nami can get treatment, and Luffy recognizes and respects her for doing this. He follows her lead and truly appreciates what she's done for his crew. Then there's Vivi's actions outside of the opening chapters of Drum Island and her conversations with Dalton, which I completely skipped over. She saves Usopp when he's buried in the avalanche, leading to one of my favorite Zoro-Usopp joke interactions, and then there's this really important panel here, when Usopp is telling Vivi to calm down and have faith in Luffy and Sanji, and Vivi thinks to herself, "It's important to have faith in your friends." She, at this point, sees the crew as her friends. This is a major development. The crew are no longer just those pirates bringing me to Alabasta, they are her friends. And I mentioned in the last part, we see what Luffy will do for his friends. In fact, she says this line the chapter before Luffy calls Chopper his friend. As we arrive at Alabasta, we're going to see how this new, close relationship the crew have with Vivi and the relationship Vivi and Luffy have with one another will play a part in the story to come. It's not one that has just appeared without reason or warning, but one that has been developed over hundreds of pages, one with a basis on their shared experience leading up to this point. Hand in hand with this journey of relationships between Vivi and the crew, the theme of leadership is also very important to keep in mind. The dichotomy of when to use force and when not to use force, the two opposite outlooks of negotiate and seek peace, Vivi, and punch first and go from there, Luffy. How these two outlooks interact and overlap will be an important part of Alabasta, and is again something Oda has been preparing us for this whole saga. I was going to put this into the things I missed section, but I think this point has greater ramifications, so I'll slot it in here. Chopper can talk to animals. I was going to mention it when we get to Alabasta, but now that I've got space for it, let's bring it into the greater context. The animals Oda has been introducing in the Grand Line have been a step above those in the East Blue in intelligence and capability. Sure, we've had our Chochos, our Moo-Moos, and our Richies, capable of understanding speech and whatnot, but now we're seeing Mr. 13 and Miss Friday tool-using, order-taking, sketch-drawing, highly intelligent animals. Karoo as well as highly intelligent and motivated. The Lapins certainly seemed intelligent with their tactics as well as, more importantly, how they reciprocate Luffy's kindness. Chopper takes the cake of course, but he has eaten the human fruit, so we can't judge that he was highly intelligent before that point, though he certainly is now. I think it's worthwhile keeping in mind that leading into Alabasta, Oda has been ramping up the abilities of animals and has introduced a member of the crew able to communicate with them directly. It's not outside the realm of expectation to think that animals may play a part in the adventure that is to come. I think that about covers it. Now we're ready to land in Alabasta, fully reminded with what Oda has been introducing throughout the Alabasta saga. We'll land in Alabasta for realsies this time next part. I can't wait to touch down in the land of sand. Surely I still missed some things though. I can't help but feel that way since I can just tell that during editing some random panel will pop out at me and I will reevaluate everything I've known so far. That's why I give myself deadlines, otherwise I would never be done. That's why I leave it all to you to let me know what I've missed. In fact, let me give some appreciation to those who have left comments on this series so far by the time I've recorded this script, both new and old viewers who I appreciate so much. Your support really brightens my days and really motivates me to continue making these videos. So in no particular order and with preemptive apologies if I mispronounce your names, Silly Gilly, Wayward Rivulet, Love Yurko, Emelina Milgram, Mugiwara MSH, Michelle Yvonne, The A and the Z, 4984 Christian, Desolate Leng, Richard Dunlap or Numwa Notori 143, Sinteki Gaming or Hodgy Wow, Kadako or Pepperoni Mage, Leviz Colin, EU Merton, Kerry Christensen, Noah Nidinger, Space Rodin, Schmay, Triple T, Art Table Talk, Happy the Justice Cookie Bunny, Alexander, Ed L, JPK, Thebolt H, Carl Kohler, Agiolnik, GK Milena, Diomorphus, Hawk of Death, Namer of the Treasure Chest, Michael Elisha, Tri-Fan. Thank you all and all of you who watch, because it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching and I hope you have a fruitful day.